That single sentence. That was all it took. Just a few words from a hospital nurse, and my entire world, the solid, stable life I thought I had built, just shattered. It ended my marriage, completely, before I even had a chance to process the terrifying thought that the woman I loved could have died. And here's the brutal, ugly truth that nobody wants to hear, but I have to say it: the moment I heard she wasn't alone in that car, my concern for her life evaporated. Just gone. Poof. And I know how that sounds. I really do. But let me tell you my story, because I don't think I'm the villain here. My name is David. I'm 33 years old. What I'm about to tell you happened just 10 months ago, but some days it feels like it just happened, raw and fresh. Other days, it feels like a lifetime ago, a distant nightmare I'm still waking up from. I honestly believed I had a solid marriage. We'd been together for 6 years, married for 4, and we had that kind of relationship where we still kissed goodbye in the mornings, sent each other stupid memes during work, and just genuinely enjoyed each other's company. My wife, Sarah, she's 31, works in marketing. She's one of those people everyone instantly loves at parties, funny, charming, knows exactly how to make you feel like you're the most interesting person in the room. I truly thought I was lucky. I thought I'd won some kind of life lottery, finding someone who actually wanted to build a real future with me. Looking back now, yeah, I can see how incredibly naive that sounds. But at the time, I was convinced we were happy. It was a Friday evening. Sarah walked into the living room, her overnight bag already packed. She told me she was driving up to visit her friend, Jessica, for the weekend. Apparently, Jessica was going through a terrible breakup, a real mess, crying all the time, not eating, the whole 9 yards. Sarah said she needed to be there for her. I remember thinking how incredibly sweet that was, how much I admired her for being such a caring friend. I even helped her carry her bag out to the car. I asked if she needed me to check her tire pressure. It had been a while since her last oil change. She just laughed, kissed me, and told me I worried too much. Said she'd be fine, and she'd text me when she got there. I stood there, watching her pull out of the driveway, waving like an idiot, then went back inside to watch a movie I'd been meaning to catch up on. I trusted her. Completely. That's the part that still makes me want to punch a hole through a wall every time I think about it. I trusted her so implicitly that I didn't question a single word. Around 9 that night, she texted, said she'd arrived safely, and Jessica was even worse than she'd thought. I sent back a heart emoji and told her to give Jessica a hug from me. Then I went to bed, alone, assuming my wife was being a good friend, drifting off to sleep feeling grateful I'd married someone with such a big heart. Saturday morning, I woke up, expecting a text from Sarah. Maybe a photo of her and Jessica having breakfast, or doing some kind of self-care thing. Nothing. I figured they'd slept in. By noon, I was starting to feel a little off about it, a little uneasy, but I didn't want to be that husband, you know? The one who checks in every 5 minutes. By 6 o'clock in the evening, I'd sent 3 texts and tried calling twice. Straight to voicemail. Now, I was genuinely worried. Have you ever had that gut feeling, that cold dread, where you know something's wrong, but you can't quite put your finger on what it is? That's exactly where I was. By 1 o'clock in the morning, I was pacing through the house, trying to decide if I was completely overreacting or if something was actually terribly wrong. I almost called the police. I was literally looking up the non-emergency number when my phone rang. Unknown number. I answered immediately, my heart pounding like a drum, half expecting Sarah had just lost her phone or something. The woman on the other end asked if I was David Miller. Her voice had that professional, calm tone that medical people use when they're about to deliver news that's anything but calm. I confirmed it was me, my voice tight, and asked who was calling. She told me she was calling from Maplewood Medical Center. My wife, Sarah, had been admitted approximately an hour ago following a vehicle accident. She said Sarah was stable but had sustained injuries and that I needed to come in as soon as possible. Everything blurred for a second. My wife was in the hospital. My wife had been in a car accident. My wife could have died. I told her I was coming right away, that I could be there in 20 minutes. I was asking if Sarah was okay, what had happened. The nurse explained Sarah had a concussion, several lacerations, and a possible fractured rib. She said Sarah was conscious and asking for me. Then she said something that made my blood freeze in my veins. "Sir, I need to inform you that your wife was not alone in the vehicle." I just froze. My brain took a few seconds, a painful, agonizing eternity, to process those words. I asked her, my voice barely a whisper, what she meant. "The other passenger in the vehicle was a Mr. Marcus Thorne," she said. "He was also injured in the accident and is currently being treated in the emergency room." Silence. Complete. Total. Silence. Not the kind of silence where you're searching for words. This was the kind of silence where every single thought in your head has just been wiped clean, replaced by a single, screaming question mark. Marcus Thorne. I knew that name. Sarah had mentioned him before. Always casually, always in passing. He was some kind of artist, did freelance design work. Apparently they'd crossed paths at some networking event her company hosted months ago. She'd mentioned that Marcus had helped her get in touch with a graphic designer, or that he'd recommended some downtown gallery. Marcus. The guy she'd never once suggested I should meet. The guy whose name came up just often enough to seem normal, but never often enough to seem suspicious. The nurse, bless her heart, asked if I was still there. I managed to croak out a yes, I'm still on the line. She asked if I would be coming to the hospital tonight. I looked around my living room. At the couch where Sarah and I had watched movies, our legs tangled together. At the photos on the wall from our wedding day, us so young and full of hope. At the coffee table where, just yesterday morning, we'd eaten breakfast together and she complained about her boss and I'd listened like a good husband should. I thanked her, quietly, for calling. Said I appreciated her letting me know. She started to say something about Sarah asking for me, but I hung up before she could finish. I placed my phone down on the kitchen counter, so carefully, like it was made of fragile glass and might shatter if I wasn't gentle. Then I just sat down at the table and stared at the wall. For what might have been 5 minutes, or 5 hours. I honestly couldn't tell you. My wife had lied to me. She hadn't gone to see Jessica. She'd gone to be with Marcus Thorne. She'd looked me in the eyes, kissed me goodbye, let me help her pack her bag, and driven off to spend the night with another man. And then she'd crashed with him in the car at 2 o'clock in the morning, coming back from wherever they'd been together. I didn't cry. I didn't yell. I didn't throw anything or punch the wall, or do any of the things you see people do in movies when they find out they've been betrayed. I just sat there, feeling like someone had reached inside my chest and scooped out everything that made me human, leaving behind just an empty shell that still knew how to breathe. That's when my marriage ended. Not when I filed the papers. Not when I moved out. It ended right there, sitting at my kitchen table at 2:30 in the morning, still wearing the t-shirt I'd slept in, holding a phone that wouldn't stop buzzing with calls from the hospital that I wasn't going to answer. My wife was in the hospital, asking for me, and I wasn't going to go. Everyone was going to think I was a monster, and I didn't care. Because the person I'd promised to love in sickness and in health had just revealed herself to be someone I didn't even know. Let me pause here for a second, because I know what some of you are probably thinking. You're thinking I should have gone to the hospital. That I should have at least made sure she was okay before making any decisions. And maybe you're right. But here's what I realized in that moment, sitting there in the dark. The elaborate lie she constructed, the fake crisis with Jessica, the careful planning, all of it, it told me this wasn't a mistake. This was calculated. When someone can look you in the eyes and lie that smoothly, what else are they capable of? That question terrified me more than anything else. I didn't go to the hospital that night. And yes, I know that makes me sound like a cold, heartless person. But let me tell you what I did instead. I sat at my kitchen table until the sun came up, staring at my phone as it buzzed and buzzed with calls from numbers I didn't recognize. And I let every single one of them go to voicemail. I wasn't being cruel. I was in shock. The kind of shock where your brain just shuts down because it can't process what's happening. Like when you touch something so hot that for a second, you don't even feel the pain. You just feel nothing. That's where I was. Nowhere. My wife was in a hospital bed asking for me. And I was sitting in our kitchen realizing that everything I thought I knew about my life was a lie. But I couldn't just sit there forever, doing nothing. So around 7 o'clock in the morning, when I figured people would actually be awake, I did the only thing that made sense to me. I called Jessica. Sarah's friend. The one she was supposedly visiting. The one who was supposedly going through a terrible breakup and needed my wife's support so desperately that Sarah had to drop everything and drive up there for the weekend. Jessica answered on the fourth ring, sounding groggy and confused. I asked her if Sarah was still there with her. There was a long pause. Then Jessica asked me what I was talking about. I explained that Sarah had driven up Friday evening to spend the weekend with her, to help her through her breakup. And was she okay? Could I talk to Sarah for a second? Another pause. Longer this time. David, Jessica said, her voice still thick with sleep, I'm not going through a breakup. And Sarah's not here. I haven't seen her in like 3 weeks. Is everything okay? I thanked her, told her everything was fine, and hung up before she could ask any more questions. I felt something crack inside my chest. It wasn't just the affair. I mean, yes, the affair was horrible, but people have affairs. People make mistakes. People get weak or stupid or selfish. What utterly broke me was the lie. The planning. The sheer, deliberate calculation of it all. Sarah hadn't just cheated on me in a moment of weakness. She had constructed an entire false reality. She had picked Jessica's name specifically because she knew I wouldn't question it. She had invented a breakup, invented a crisis, looked me in the eyes, and told me this elaborate story. Let me help her pack. Let me kiss her goodbye. Let me worry about her tire pressure, for crying out loud. She had texted me from wherever she actually was, pretending to be at Jessica's place, telling me Jessica was worse than expected. Every single word was calculated. Every single moment was a performance. And I had believed all of it because I trusted my wife. I needed to see the car. I don't know why, exactly. Maybe I thought seeing the physical evidence would make it real. Or maybe I just needed something concrete to hold on to, because my entire reality had just dissolved into nothing. I called the police department and asked where vehicles from accidents got towed. They gave me the address of a lot out near the old industrial park. I drove there around 10 o'clock in the morning, showed them my ID and our marriage certificate along with the registration, and they let me through to examine the vehicle. The car was worse than I'd imagined. The entire front end was crumpled like a tin can. The windshield was shattered, and there was dried blood on the driver's side headrest that made my stomach churn. But that's not what truly got to me. What got to me was the luggage. Sarah's overnight bag was still in the back seat, partially unzipped, and I could see clothes spilling out of it. I opened the car door and pulled the bag toward me. And that's when I saw it. Lingerie. Expensive lingerie. The kind she'd bought for our anniversary last year. The kind she'd modeled for me with that shy smile she does when she's trying to be romantic. Black lace, red silk, things I recognized because I'd seen them before in our bedroom. She had packed them for him. She had taken the intimate things that belonged to our marriage and brought them to another man. I felt sick, but I kept looking, because some dark part of me needed to know everything. There was a separate, smaller bag, like a toiletry case, and inside were protection, massage oil, and a bottle of expensive wine. This wasn't a spontaneous thing. This was planned. Meticulously planned. Then I saw the car seat. Our nephew's car seat. Still strapped into the back seat where I'd installed it 2 weekends ago when my brother and his family had visited. Sarah had seen that car seat. She had looked at it, known it was there, and still gotten into this car with Marcus Thorne to drive to wherever they were going. She had been willing to risk not just her own life, but potentially a child's life if circumstances had been different. If my brother had needed us to babysit. If anything had changed in the plan. That's when something fundamental shifted in me. Up until that moment, part of me had still been thinking of Sarah as my wife, as someone I loved who had hurt me, as someone I might eventually forgive or at least understand. But standing there, looking at that car seat, I realized I was looking at the wreckage left by someone I didn't know at all. The Sarah I married would never have been this reckless. The Sarah I married would never have planned something this elaborate. The Sarah I thought I knew didn't exist. She never had. I took photos of everything with my phone. The luggage, the lingerie, the toiletry bag, the car seat. I don't know why. Maybe for evidence. Maybe for divorce proceedings. Maybe just to prove to myself later that I hadn't imagined it. Then I closed the car door, walked back to my truck, and drove home in complete silence. My phone had 23 missed calls by then, some from the hospital, some from numbers I didn't recognize, several from Sarah's sister, Emily. I ignored all of them. When I got home, I sat down at my computer and looked up divorce attorneys. I read reviews, compared prices. Checked credentials. I did it the same way I'd research a new laptop or a vacation destination, methodically, emotionally detached. Because if I let myself feel anything, I was going to fall apart. I scheduled a consultation for the following week with a guy who specialized in high-conflict divorces. Then I went into our bedroom and started pulling my clothes out of the closet. I wasn't moving out. Not yet. But I needed to separate my things from hers, because I couldn't look at our shared closet anymore without wanting to burn everything in it. Sarah's sister, Emily, called again that afternoon. This time, I answered. She was crying, asking me where I was, why I hadn't come to the hospital. Didn't I care that Sarah was hurt? What kind of husband abandons his wife when she's injured? I let her finish. Then I said, very calmly, that I couldn't be around someone who had lied to me so completely, and that I was filing for divorce. Emily went quiet. Then she asked what I was talking about. What lie? And I realized Sarah hadn't told anyone the truth. Of course she hadn't. So I told Emily everything. About calling Jessica, about the fake breakup story, about Marcus Thorne being in the car, about the lingerie, and everything else I'd found in that overnight bag. Emily didn't say anything for a long time. Then she said she needed to process this and that she'd call me back. She hung up. She didn't call back that day. And when she did start calling again a few days later, it was to beg me to visit Sarah anyway, because family is family. I guess blood really is thicker than water. Or maybe she just couldn't accept that her sister was capable of something like this. Here's what I want you to understand. I'm not telling you this story to get sympathy or to prove I was right. I'm telling you because I think a lot of people stay in situations like this out of guilt, or obligation, or because they're worried about what other people will think. And I want you to know that sometimes, the kindest thing you can do for yourself is walk away from someone who's shown you exactly who they are. That night, I slept in the guest bedroom for the first time in 4 years. I stared at the ceiling, thinking about car seats and lingerie and telephone poles and lies. And I realized something that should have been obvious from the beginning. I wasn't grieving my wife. I was grieving a person who had never actually existed. Sarah called me on Monday morning from the hospital. I almost didn't answer, but something made me pick up. Maybe I wanted to hear what she'd say. Maybe I needed confirmation that I was doing the right thing. I don't know. Her voice was weak and shaky. She asked me where I was, why I hadn't come to see her. Didn't I care that she'd been hurt? She said she'd been asking for me for 3 days and nobody would tell her where I was. She sounded genuinely confused, like she actually couldn't understand why her husband wasn't sitting by her bedside, holding her hand. I didn't say anything at first. I just listened to her breathe on the other end of the line. This woman I'd shared a bed with for 4 years. And I felt absolutely nothing. Then I told her, very calmly, that I knew about Marcus Thorne. There was silence. Not the kind of silence where someone's thinking of what to say. The kind of silence where someone's entire world just collapsed and they're trying to figure out how to rebuild it fast enough to salvage something. Then she started crying, saying it wasn't what I thought, that she could explain, that it was complicated, and I needed to come to the hospital so we could talk in person. I asked her if she'd been with him that night. More silence. Then she said yes, but that I didn't understand the whole situation. I asked her if she'd lied about going to see Jessica. She said yes, but she'd only done it because she didn't know how to tell me the truth. I asked her if she'd packed our anniversary lingerie in her overnight bag to wear for another man. She didn't answer that one. Instead, she started talking about how much pain she was in, how scared she'd been when the car crashed, how she'd thought she was going to die, and all she could think about was me. I told her I'd spoken to Jessica, that I'd seen the car and everything in it, and that I'd already contacted a divorce attorney. She lost it. Started screaming at me through the phone, calling me heartless, asking how I could abandon her when she was lying in a hospital bed, saying I was a monster for caring more about my pride than about her safety. I let her scream until she ran out of steam. Then I said the only thing that mattered. You looked me in the eyes and lied to me. I told her that she'd planned this, that she'd used our friend as a cover story, that she'd let me help her pack a bag full of lies, and that I couldn't trust a single word that came out of her mouth anymore. She went quiet again. Then she said something that made me realize just how far gone we really were. She said that what hurt her most wasn't the accident, wasn't even losing me, but that I was being so cruel when she needed me most. Like she was the victim here. Like I was the one who'd done something wrong. The pressure came from everyone after that. Her sister, Emily, called me regularly for 2 weeks, begging me to at least visit Sarah once, to give her a chance to explain in person, to show some basic human decency. I don't know if Emily didn't believe what I told her about the affair, or if she just thought family should stick together no matter what, but she genuinely seemed to think I was the bad guy in this situation. Her parents called me too, her dad especially, saying I was making a mistake, that marriages go through rough patches and you don't just throw away 4 years because of one night. One night, that's what they kept calling it, like it was a drunk kiss at a party and not a premeditated weekend getaway with another man. I tried explaining it to them, but nobody wanted to hear it. They didn't care about the lies, or the planning, or the fact that their daughter had used our mutual friend as an alibi. All they saw was an injured woman recovering at her sister's place and a husband who wouldn't come see her. I was the villain in their story, and nothing I said was going to change that. My own friends were split. Half of them understood and supported my decision. The other half thought I was being too harsh, that I should at least wait until she was fully recovered before making any major decisions. But here's what nobody seemed to get. This wasn't about the hospital. This wasn't about her being hurt. This was about the fact that the person I'd married didn't exist. The woman recovering at her sister's apartment was a stranger who'd been wearing my wife's face for who knows how long, and I couldn't trust anything about her anymore. How do you forgive someone when you don't even know who they really are? That's not a rhetorical question. I genuinely don't know the answer. I filed for divorce 5 weeks after the accident. Sarah was out of the hospital by then, staying with Emily, and my attorney served her the papers at her sister's apartment. I didn't do it to be vindictive. I did it because every day I waited was another day I was lying to myself about whether this marriage could be saved. It couldn't. Some things you can come back from, and some things you can't. And this was the kind of betrayal that burns the bridge so completely that there's nothing left to rebuild on. The divorce process was ugly. Sarah fought me on everything, the house, the savings, the furniture, like if she could just keep enough pieces of our life together, then maybe it would prove the marriage had meant something. Her attorney painted me as cold and unforgiving. Said I'd abandoned my wife in her time of need. Tried to make the affair seem like a one-time mistake that I was blowing out of proportion. My attorney presented the evidence. The phone records that I'd subpoenaed, showing months of calls and texts between Sarah and Marcus. We each had our own phone plans through our jobs, so I'd never seen the bills. The credit card statements showing hotel rooms and restaurants I'd never been to. Charges I'd never questioned because we kept our finances mostly separate and I trusted her. The photos I'd taken at the impound lot. It wasn't one night. It had been going on for almost 7 months. 7 months of lies. 7 months of looking me in the face every morning and pretending everything was fine. 7 months of planning and covering tracks and playing the role of faithful wife while living an entirely separate life I knew nothing about. When I saw all that evidence laid out in black and white, I felt vindicated, but also devastated, because it meant I'd been living in a fantasy for more than half a year without even knowing it. 7 months after the accident, after the divorce was finalized and the house had been sold and we divided everything down to the last coffee mug, I called Sarah one final time. Not because I wanted closure, or because I'd forgiven her, or because I thought there was anything left to say that mattered. I called because I needed her to understand one thing that I don't think she ever had. When she answered, I could hear the hope in her voice. Like maybe this was me calling to say I'd made a mistake, that I wanted her back. I didn't let her talk. I just told her the truth as clearly as I could. I didn't leave because you were in that car with him, I said. I left because you were willing to lie so easily, to plan so carefully, to risk so much just to have what you wanted. I left because I realized that if you could do all that, then I had no idea what else you might be capable of, and I couldn't spend the rest of my life waiting to find out. She was quiet for a long time. Then she said something about how I'd never understand what it was like to feel trapped, to need something I couldn't give her, to be desperate enough to make bad choices. Like that explained anything. Like that made it okay. I told her I hoped she found whatever she was looking for, that I genuinely meant that, but that I couldn't be part of her life anymore because I didn't know who she was and I didn't trust who she might become. Then, I hung up. That was 3 months ago. I haven't spoken to her since. Sometimes people ask me if I regret not going to the hospital that night, if I wish I'd handled things differently, if I think I was too harsh. And honestly, no, I don't regret it. Because the truth is, I didn't abandon my injured wife. I protected myself from a person who'd been lying to me so long and so well that I'd started to believe the fantasy was real. And maybe that makes me cold. Maybe that makes me heartless. But it also makes me free. Some people survive car crashes. I survived a marriage to someone I never really knew. Here's what I've learned from all of this. Trust isn't just about believing someone won't hurt you. It's about believing that if they do hurt you, it'll be because they made a mistake, not because they planned it. Sarah didn't make a mistake. She made a series of calculated choices over 7 months. And each one of those choices told me exactly who she was. I just wish I'd been paying attention sooner. If there's one thing I want you to take away from my story, it's this: when someone shows you who they really are, believe them the first time. Don't wait for the second chance or the explanation or the apology. Just believe them and act accordingly. It might save you months or years of living in a lie. And to everyone out there who's ever felt guilty for walking away from someone who harmed them, you don't owe anyone your suffering. Not your spouse, not your family, not your friends, and definitely not strangers on the internet who think they know better. You owe yourself peace. And sometimes peace means walking away from people you once loved. That's not cruelty. That's survival. What do you think about this story? Would you have gone to the hospital?